Hello, and welcome to our Signal Media webinar series. I'm George Seifers with Signal Magazine. This presentation is sponsored by Security Compass, and today we will discuss the new software security requirements, the challenges they present, and some ways to overcome those challenges. Security Compass was founded in 2004 and began with a team of experienced penetration testers. Today, they work with many large enterprises globally to manage cybersecurity risk through balanced development automation. They have three key offerings. Their flagship product, SD Elements, is designed to enable organizations to deliver software quickly and reduce costs through automation. Their modular, role-based e-learning solutions empower organizations to embrace DevSecOps, and their strategic advisory services offer expertise in cloud security, pen testing, and red teaming for better security posture. Our distinguished panel of experts include Kyle Lai, the President and Chief Information Security Officer with KLC Consulting, Ihan Tech, Vice President of Information Security with Cyber Electra, Altaz Valani, Director of Insights Research with Security Compass, and Hassan Yassar, Technical Director of Continuous Deployment Capability at Carnegie Mellon University. This presentation is designed to be interactive, so throughout the webinar, viewers are welcome to submit questions using the Ask a Question box on the webinar console. Also, we will be asking a couple of poll questions along the way, so we look forward to your responses. And with that, it is time to get started. Altaz, would you like to kick things off?
Great, thanks. I appreciate that, George. And welcome everybody, and thank you so much again for attending this webinar. We look forward to an engaging discussion with you. And if you've got any questions, as George mentioned, please don't hesitate, put them in the chat. We'd be happy to take these on. So our presentation really today is focused on secure software development in the US government agencies. What are the issues, the challenges, the next steps? And if we kind of take a look at where we are today, this all really started with the EO 14028. And I'd like to just pause here for a moment and ask our panelists to provide their thoughts and their insights on the timelines and what precipitated the need to consider secure software. And so I'll start with you, Ihan. If you can just offer your thoughts and your comments on the executive order, and then I'll go through the other panelists, and then we'll go forward with looking at what NIST has been doing in this regard.
Thank you, Altaz. The President Joe Biden issued an executive order designed to improve the federal government's defense against cyber attacks, stating the prevention, detection, assessment, and remediation of the cyber incidents is the kind of just the top priority, and as such that they are essential to the national and economic kind of just the security as well, right? I think that the administration recognized the inherent risks in the software development, and the EO is designed to improve the government's kind of just the effort to identify, deter, protect, and kind of just the detect and respond to the actors, the threat actors, and their actions as well, right? And it's interesting that the scope, although it looks kind of just the mandate for the U.S. federal systems and suppliers, while that is a very large set of the systems and organizations by itself, right? And it's reasonable to expect that the compliance frameworks, such as the kind of just the SOC 2 or the hard trust, to incorporate these kind of just the controls as well.
Kyle, do you have some thoughts on this? Oh, sorry, I can't hear you, Kyle. I'm not sure if you're on mute.
Oh, yes. Yeah, sorry. I think with the incidents, security incidents in the past few years that's related to the software, I think that's just adding the urgency for the EO, the executive order. So I think their government is really looking into putting this into practice fairly quickly. And it was actually pretty surprising when I saw that timeline, within 30 days or 90 days, you have to actually put this in place, 180 days, you have to put the document, the draft, right, draft the SSDF in place. So yeah, it was actually pretty aggressive, and it's good to actually see that NIST were able to pull this off.
Yeah, it's interesting. A number of agencies have kind of moved ahead with this and started to produce material and artifacts to help us as we go through this. And we'll dive into this a little bit more as well. Hassan, do you have thoughts on this? The executive order that sort of set the context for the discussion that we're going to be having today around secure software? Oh, you're on mute, Hassan.
Now I'm able to find the mute button. Thank you. Apologize. So I'm really excited to really, first of all, talking with all of you. Yes, that memo, its executive order is really timely because in reality, I know we see a lot of kind of a shaking type of situation. And I kind of, when I look at that executive order, that reminds me as an industry, as the community, as the organization, we are part of the same problems, or we are inside that situation. Like when we are talking about the software, it's everywhere. When we're talking about things that we are building, it's everywhere. Now this executive order putting a groundwork that we all responsible, especially starting from the software bill of materials, was exactly called out in this memo. Was one of the biggest highlight for me. Was not really called that out before, and then now it's saying like we have to have a bill of materials. We have to follow up all this dependencies because of the SolarWinds case. I'm sure everybody know that. There was a kind of a trigger moment. We are relying on an application, but if you don't really secure the software supply chain, if you don't really secure the software practices, then whatever we do, how much we do in our organization, still will depend on others. That was an eye-opener for a lot of people, including many federal agencies and as well as the civilians organization. Spend a highly regulated environment, there was a mandatory things that, yeah, we're going to do something because we're relying on our infrastructure, we're relying on our team, even though we are not a software development houses, but we still depend on the software building. So it was an interesting concept was being laid out from President Biden.
Yeah. And as we go through our presentation today, I'm going to ask each one of you if you could pull from your own experience as well. Feel free to share what you've seen, what the challenges have been, but also ways that we've been able to overcome some of the things that we're going to talk about. And in so doing, I mean, we invite people from the audience. You could come in, participate, offer your thoughts and your opinions about this as well. So looking at really what NIST has put together around this, one of the artifacts they've created is this 800-218, which is around secure software development framework. And there are 4 sections to this, 4 parts to this. One is about preparing the organization, and then we've got the need to protect the software, the need to produce well-secured software, and responding to vulnerabilities. Now, what we're going to do in this panel discussion today is we're going to take each one of these in turn and start to take a look and see what are the areas where we've seen challenges as organizations, both on in trying to construct as well as trying to consume the secure software, and then see what we could do to construct a series of activities or things that we would advise people to help them in looking at secure software development as an overall framework. And I think this would be a good time before we get started. Let's throw up that first poll, Nina, and let's find out, first of all, from the audience that's in this webinar, how would you best describe your current capabilities around software security? It'll be interesting to see what comes out and what the range of experience might be and where people might be from the perspective of software security. Keeping in mind that the intent here is to help drive out what we saw from the executive order and then looking now at what NIST is doing. So I'm going to keep the presentation moving forward while folks are filling out the poll itself. And at this point, I'm going to just break out of my full presentation mode because this is a panel discussion. And in this panel discussion, I'm going to now have us fill out what we've got in terms of practices and how we can go in there and help people as we consider this discussion. So the first thing is the preparation of the organization. And really, when we look at preparing the organization, we want to define the requirements. We want to have roles and responsibilities implemented. We want to have the right tool chains using criteria for software security that are defined, and looking at implementing and maintaining secure environments for software development. So these are all things that really are at the top level when we consider the organizations themselves. And I think what I'd like to suggest at this point is I'd like to start with you, Kyle. In your experience, as you've helped organizations prepare and looking at it from the lens of software security, what are some of the challenges you've seen, and what advice would you give to organizations to help them in terms of this particular section of the NIST framework?
Yeah. So one of the challenges that things are actually happening very quickly when you actually start getting into the DevOps, right? DevSecOps, and things are very quickly and agile methodology. So there is a lot of documentation. Well, there is very little documentation about the requirements. But companies, they do have the requirements for the software development. How do you secure them? How do you test them? And the privacy, right? There are some privacy regulations, compliance regulations. So that's all put into the part of the security and privacy requirements into the software development. However, when the software developers, when they are developing the software, a lot of time they want to do it fast because they're under pressure release, right? And a lot of time, if you don't have something that's automated to the way to test these requirements, it becomes very difficult for the developers to keep track and then make sure that these requirements are actually met, and or actually understanding what the requirements are. So to me, in the other organization, there are some tools that we actually have to, put together. I think we use one of your tool here as the element there to actually keep track of all these requirements. When you're using this language, right? These are the requirements you have to do. If you're using C or the C# or Java, they all have different requirements for protecting the code, right? Or for the development. And also privacy-wise, what are the privacy-related requirements you have to put into the code? So we actually build this into the tool so it can actually help us to keep track of the requirements. So I think this is actually one of the big challenge in the beginning. How do we actually make sure all these security requirements are actually incorporated into the software development process?
Yeah, Ayhan, you have some thoughts on this?
Absolutely, I agree with Kyle. And also, let me give you a kind of just a house analogy over there, right? Let's say that you are going to build a house. You wouldn't hand over your hard-earned kind of just the money to a contractor and simply say, go build me a house. You would decide what kind of just the house you want and what the finished house would look like, right? Put it this way, you would have a plan or blueprint that describes the overall kind of just the building project, right? In software development lifecycle, this blueprint is your requirement for user stories, depending on the kind of just the methodology that you are using, right? Some of these requirements are functional, and some of them are non-functional requirements. For example, the material that will be using to build your house is your functional requirements, right? On the other hand, how strong you want your house to be, this is your non-functional requirements, right? As an organization, if you do not provide these requirements to the SDLC practitioners, then you are leaving this decision, the making on how the security will be implemented to them. Considering the fact that unfortunately we are not training the SDLC practitioners adequately, then this should not be a surprise to anyone why we have so many kind of just sort of security issues. So we got to kind of just sort of pay attention to the security requirements. And as Carl mentioned, I mean, not only from the kind of just your technology, for example, the programming languages that you are using, but also the kind of just you need to factor into the regulatory requirements or kind of just your risk appetite and kind of just the other things and build these kind of just the security requirements so that expected kind of just the secure software. Unfortunately, most of the organizations are not able to do this, or they are kind of just doing one-size-fits-all approach. They do have 100 questions, and they give this one to the kind of just the project team to answer, right? And depending on that, they can kind of just assess the risk over there and produce the requirements for security control, right? However, this is faulty because threats and risks associated with the underlying technologies are kind of evolving, right? And we need a kind of just a sound methodology, like, for example, a threat modeling to develop those kind of just the security requirements as well, right? And there are other ingredients that you mentioned in the preparation phase, such as the kind of just the roles and responsibilities, right? This is another kind of just the important area that we are not paying too much attention to the organizations, I guess, right? Again, if you kind of just continue on to the house, building a house analogy, you need to work with different kind of just experts specialized in one area, such as carpenters or plumbers or electricians and so on, right? If you have not made this crystal clear what is expected from them and who is going to do what, especially if you have contract, then welcome to the kind of just the center of the chaos over there. Same thing is happening in the kind of just the software development lifecycle, right? Executive team, they can delegate the responsibilities, but one thing that they can delegate is their accountability, right? So with this in mind, the executive team needs to kind of pay attention to the governance, security governance piece to establish the right roles and responsibilities and ensure that kind of just there is a constant communication between these teams as well.
That's great. And just before I get to you, Hassan, I know we had put up that poll initially. Nina, are we ready to publish that poll? It'd be interesting to see what response came back from that poll. Okay. And in the meantime, Hassan, if you want to keep moving forward, I'd like to get your thoughts as well on preparing the organization.
Yes, thank you, Altes. When I look at this first section is prepare the organization, it looks like we have not actually we have to do more preliminary work. Like we're just building, and I like what I put as the building a knowledge of the house. We are building the overall policies. We are building overall cultural aspect of it. This is more preparations for the next couple things we will do. One of the biggest challenges we struggle as an organization, we have a lot of siloed, pocketed capabilities or tools or understanding, specifically for software development perspective. What Kyle brought up at actual agile methodologies, people or organization are implementing wrong or different agile methodologies within the same organizations. Like I have a witness on one organization, they have about 1,500 developers. About maybe there's like 15 to 20 different teams. I ended up seeing 20 different type of software development methodologies they are following that they describe. So this is really more about let's define the commonalities. Let's define what the common practices are, because we are going to build up in a software. It is not a one person's job anymore. When I say the one person, not a one team jobs anymore, because we depend other stakeholder in our organizations. That the organization will help us to get a third-party software as an example. That the organization, they have to build up the right infrastructure for us, which is PO05. Then we're going to build up some practices and responsibilities, which is PO02 as the action item. So when we look at all this perspective, really we have to look at step back. We would like to be a secure organization. What really means for a secure organization? Then we can build up the secure software. Then we can ready for the vulnerable analysis and etc. So the biggest challenge for me is actually siloed people, siloed organization within the same building or even the same building. Still, I see the people are not communicating with each other. They might think it DevOps, but they're not doing DevOps because it's against the philosophy of DevOps. So when, again, another misunderstanding or the myth about the DevOps, we don't want to go fast. Yeah, that is great, but we would like to be secure and high quality. DevOps doesn't mean let's go fast and fail. It's technically applicable for many organizations. So we have to be careful on following the similar guidelines or same thoughts.
Yeah.
And then most important challenging is it's the culture. It's about organization structures. We have to change our mindset as we are all responsible, not you and I anymore. That's a big change for organizations. That goes back to PO.2 for implement roles and responsibilities. How are we going to define responsibilities without creating another organizational siloed unit? Because we can help each other. It's really important, a big challenge for organization, because if you are creating, as an example, if you're creating a DevSecOps engineering group, just that title, then what will happen the rest of the organization? If you're creating the SOC people as a security operation team, we should have, like against an organization, but somehow mindset should be as sharing responsibilities. Mindset should be let's put ourselves or creating empathy to help each other solve the problem, not punting the ball each other.
Yeah, that's great. And I think this sorry, go ahead, Hassan. You had another comment?
Now, and the one thing I would like to say about the training pieces, which is very related for roles and responsibilities, sometimes we are asking the folks, and such as developers mainly, we are saying, yes, let's build up the secure software. But do we have any right training for the organization that we invest? And how much we are measuring our training for the workforce they are implementing their job? Because nothing is happening by itself. It's a learning. Learning should be on a demand basis, and learning should be more relevant to what we are building. That's exactly prepared organization. And from the NIST and then 218 says that we have to really build up some preliminary work. Regardless of what type of we do, we have to make sure we have a good house that we live on it.
Yeah, great. So we've got some insights based on experience that's come out of this now. And I want to go back now to the poll that we put up there. And most of the people in this webinar are looking to gradually build up and to improve the capability. So it's a journey. It's something that really a lot of teams are moving in the right direction. Nobody came back and said that it's not even on the agenda. So software security is important. The survey results, anything surprise anyone? Does it sound similar to what you've experienced as you've interacted with people in the federal space as well? I'm just going to open this up. Either one of, any one of you can go in and basically comment on the survey results, and then we'll move on.
I am glad to see. I'm just going to jump right away. I am happy to see that as the progress, because it's a good thing. Like I was expecting similar things. We are improving our capabilities, which is about 60%. And in the software world, in the secure software world, it's hard to say we are secure. It depends on the moment. It depends on our organization that we are living in. It depends on our team structure. So we continuously build up the capabilities, which is great sense to me. Then, and I also look at the withdrawals and process about the 10 place and 10%. I mean, it's okay, it's expected, but I'm really eager to happy to see that about 60% are gradually building, and that's hope for the future.
Yeah, wonderful. So let me just move this presentation forward. Then, really, the next step is all about protecting the software, right? So we talked about the organizational side of things. Now we want to protect all forms of code from unauthorized access and tampering. We want to provide a mechanism for verifying software release integrity, and this is a big thing when we talk about pipelines, and especially in the DevOps space. But it need not be just DevOps. There's also making sure that from a delivery standpoint, the software that we are delivering is the software that was intended to be delivered. And then archiving, protecting each software release. And there's a whole bunch of stuff to unpack in this section here as well. And I guess what I'll do is I'll start with you, Ayhan, on protecting the software. Any thoughts, any ideas, any feedback, advice that you could provide to people?
Right. Of course, the kind of just the source code is extremely important, right? And depending on the kind of just the industry, it is confidential as well, right? However, more and more, we kind of just witness that these software is not being protected adequately, right? For example, just that there are some excuses over there. Hey, we are agile. I mean, we are not going to kind of just, we are going to share this. Sharing is good, but in security, sharing sometimes is not caring, right? We got to kind of just sort of maintain the software in a secure area, like to kind of just adequately manage the kind of just, secure code repositories, and also apply some kind of cryptographic techniques so that we can kind of just ensure that software integrity and kind of just the overall posture is not being maliciously or accidentally kind of just compromised over there, right? But again, more and more we see that software is being kind of just found in the development team's machines, laptops. They can freely take this to kind of just to the home. We gotta kind of just sort of pay attention to these kind of just sort of things over there, right? But another thing that I would like to bring to the attention, organizations usually kind of just use some security governance. They do have policies, they do have standards, right? And these standards or policies needs to be kind of just applied to these areas. Let's say that. I'm a software developer and I would like to kind of just secure my source code, right? How do I do that, right? We need to kind of produce the process procedures for our kind of just the SDLC practitioners so that they are going to know. I think Hassan mentioned that the security training is extremely important, but he's not mentioning that the kind of just the generic security training that we are providing over there, right? That the training should be kind of specific to those kind of just areas, and it's kind of just a role-based training that we need to provide, right? Once we apply this kind of just to the security governance policy and standards, along with the kind of just the security training and awareness, I do believe that I think we can achieve the kind of just the software kind of just the development security over there as well. And we need to kind of just, of course, utilize some of the technologies. Let's say that DLP. It is kind of just newly it is being kind of just bringing the software source code kind of just data loss prevention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Opportunity sometimes the developers kind of just share the source code, right, via email or via chat, right? Depending on the kind of just the environments that they are using, this can kind of just leak outside, right? If you have a DLP kind of just technology as well, ensure that this is kind of configured to catch those things and kind of just prevent the leakage as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because you're essentially pointing to the code itself being an asset, and I know there's a whole other discussion we can have on zero trust and sort of protecting the assets, but who's got access to the source code, what device is accessing the source code, when can they get access to it? All these things that are part of the zero trust discussion begin to emerge now as we take a look at protecting the software and enabling paradigms to go in there and help us as we look at protecting our software. And Hassan, do you have some thoughts on protecting the software?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, I would like to open a parenthesis on the first sentences, Altez. We said source code, including other artifacts. It's really important because that's actually called out on the first statement, PS11. We have to really store all the artifacts inside repositories. It's a really big problem because when we look at just a code perspective, but there are other elements also important to protect. Code is okay. We have a configuration item as an example. A lot of data bridges happening with sharing the deployment practices, or sharing some configuration items, or sharing application configuration. All these things are really important. Let's say we are deploying to the cloud environment. How are we going to protect our cloud script as an example? So the concept that DevOps or the community is bringing about DevSecOps practices, or the practice which is everything is in code, should be treated in the same environment. That's we can protect it, because code is good to have, but other importance that should be the same environment we can protect it. And second things I would like to highlight here, and was partially touched into the protect the software section on the documents and its framework. We need to monitor our software development environments. Like, what is really important? We always rely on tooling with respect to the what the data is generated with respect to software infrastructure, but we should be cautious about who's accessing our environment, who is changing the record. There are a lot of weaknesses happening. People are changing some of the core modules in our infrastructures. How we know that? How do we keep track of those changes? Do we have any policies and guardrails for any code changes? Are we monitoring all the pullback from the repositories anywhere else? It's really playing a key role for look at our development practices with a secure mindset.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And Kyle, sorry, go ahead, Hassan, and then I'll move to Kyle.
So it's one thing, and another one is important, archiving ones. So there are a lot of API is already available in the many software industries right now. We retire the API, but still is active. It is going to be a vector for us. It is, as an organization, we have to put some policy, or we have to put some lifecycle on the endpoint, such as API or the content of the API. It's kind of often ignored. We always know we are doing great, but when we push into production, it is not stopped there. We have to think about what is really happening in the production, so we can decommission our API, we decommission our softwares or the dependencies. That's another reason we have to use the S1 as an example to know where we are, all the components. So stop here.
Yeah, makes sense. And Kyle, your thoughts on this?
Sure. Yeah, a couple of comments. And I heard a lot of very good recommendations here. So from the code itself, the code repository software itself, the configuration, they're all important, but the code repository platform itself, you have to make sure it's secure as well. Because like Jenkins and all these software, they do have vulnerabilities once in a while. And sometimes companies, they kind of overlook that. And there's one company I work with, and a fairly large companies, like, when's the last time you actually update that, apply the patch to Jenkins? And it's like, probably like 2 versions ago. And it's probably you have to apply the latest patch, because there are some security vulnerabilities and they were not really aware of them. The other one is from the integrity point of view, when you actually start getting to agile DevOps, very quickly, right? Things are happening very, very quick. And here are the changes. How do you tie what you actually develop back into the changes, right? So sometimes I see organizations that actually have like a peer review, set up like a peer review process, so that kind of have another set of eyes to verify, the changes actually tied back, and they both have to sign before you can release. That's not the only way. Obviously, there are many ways to do that, and just one of the way to actually ensure there's integrity of the code.
Yeah, it's interesting. We did have one question that came in, and I think this might be the right time to perhaps bring this up. And it really has to do very specifically to the DoD. And I think what I'll do is, maybe Hassan, you might be able to take this one. Let's see. How does DoD's DevSecOps Enterprise Repository Iron Bank, or something similar, fit into the broader government agencies' goals of establishing trusted development environments and tool chains? We see it moving in that direction, but what's the connection here? And are we looking at Iron Bank, making it available for access by DoD and related agencies? Like, do you have any thoughts on that, Hassan? Could you offer any insights based on some experience that you've got in this space?
Sure, happy that. Before that, I would like to quote something to build up to what Kyle said. I'm going to come back to question.
Yep.
There is a kind of understanding. Secure the software doesn't mean a secure software. Like as Kyle said, building up a Jenkins, it's not guaranteed that Jenkins is complete. It depends on how we configure. Or we are using a lot of secure software, may not be secure software. There are 2 different things. So we have to make sure that, and we are doing what we're supposed to do for the security practices, and rely on that security software may not be 100% secure. It depends on the timeline. So let's go back to the question what Larry is asking, I believe, for our audience. So the Department of Defense are looking for a generalized or the same infrastructures or the tooling perspective to use the same and common practices. That goes back to the prepared organization, the first bullet point. it's nice to prepare organization with the same page, because we don't want to be creating the different type pipelines with respect to DevOps. We don't want to create different software development practices. Let's be the common understanding what it looks like as building up a software, which is the Iron Man example, which is more about the container repositories, by the way. So it's good to have that a common approved containers that we know for the container that we approve that can be used many other components within the DoD. So we can utilize the same repositories for many software project or system that we are working on it. Or if you have a same common understanding what the continuous integration means or what the continuous deployment means, which is DevSecOps practices from reference design or the new design coming from the CISO office or CI office from DoD, it's really giving a guidance what we need to do. We may use the different tools, that's okay, but we have to use the same practices. The problem that we are facing, we are trying to scale up tool, but we need to scale up the process. To scale up the process, we need to have the same understanding for terminologies. We can scale up. We can scale up the knowledge. We can scale up to what the common understanding DevSecOps means using the same concept. It's not really changing, as I said, it's not really changing what we do the software business anymore. If you look at the DevOps practices in Agile or the DevSecOps, we are not creating the new software phases. We still do the same thing we do for years. Now we are using the common understanding. Like one example I can build up here, if anybody does a continuous integration in a 6-month basis, that's not a continuous integration. That has to be defined in the understanding from the people are using the similar platform. Another advantage of that platform perspective, using the same environment, we can enforce to some policy, some process through that environment. Okay? Again, there is no one-size-fits-all concept, but at least we should be a common understanding. That for that perspective, I really like that using a similar or same process and practice using different tools. And the last things about SBOM, there's 2 elements here. One is protecting the software pipeline, make sure that our software pipeline that we are building is secure. And also we have to build up the software on top, which is the next topic we'll be talking about, building up a secure software. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the current needs on the continuous ATO requirements, that it's basically ATO requirements from a DoD perspective, we have to authorize the operate any system goes into the operation environment. It is based on the NIST 800-53 controls. So all these controls, and most 80% is actually specific to the libraries and dependencies in the platform that we use. 20% is about application controls. If you segregate those using the proper SBOM policies and practice, if you use those into our pipeline, which is either Iron Bank containers or some dependencies, you're kind of solving the 80% of the control requirements. That's what the continuous ATOs is in DoD.
Sounds good. And what I'd like to do now is let's move on to the idea of producing well-secured software. And this has a lot in it. And I guess this would be a good time now as well. If we can put up that second poll as we start to make our way through this. So Nina, if you could ask the audience that second poll. And really, to the panel here, when we look at producing well-secured software, there are aspects of compliance, verification, even secure coding practices, the build process itself, looking at configuration management, all of this stuff. There's no way, even in a full 1-hour webinar, that we could unpack everything there is here. But I'd like to just, pull out, based on your experience, what are some of the challenges you've seen, and how have teams been able to successfully overcome the production of well-secured software? And I'm going to start with Kyle initially to go in and maybe offer your thoughts on what you think in this space.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot to cover in this area. But in terms of how do you actually ensure that your software is actually produced securely, I think testing is going to be security. Vulnerability testing on the code, right? To make sure that the code is static code analysis, to make sure the dynamic analysis And also to ensure that we mentioned about the SBOM. How do you actually make sure all the components that you are using, they are actually secure? That get into the open source or the software component analysis, right? And yeah, so I think I know there's a lot of cover, but I think we will have to build that security into the tool chain, into your DevOps pipeline, right? And to make sure that I know a lot of time when I was talking to the developers, it's like you have to, we have this tool, we have to, integrate this into the pipeline. And one of the question they ask is like, we'll love to do it as long as you don't slow us down, right? Because things are actually very fast. How slower is it going to get, right? So I think there are going to be some push from the top. I think, as I mentioned earlier, you really have to actually have the top management, senior management give the orders, say you have to do this securely, and people follow. Then I think everything will be a little bit easier. And when you start putting all these different tools, integrate this into the secure DevOps pipelines, you have to also mention to make sure that we have the training, right? Make sure we have the training so that developers actually understand what to do with all these security tools and the results of them. How do you actually resolve them? What is the timeline? I think these are going to be all the important steps to actually integrate into the SDLC.
Interesting. So we're now starting to see the emergence of security practices making its way down the pipeline so that developers have to understand a little bit more about what does it mean to code security, for example. You've opened up a whole new section here, Kyle, value streams and all of this starts to come in. Yeah. So let me just, let me go to Ayhan. Ayhan, your thoughts on this? Any feedback, any insights that you can offer the audience when it comes to producing well-secured software?
Absolutely. Also, the best way to solve a problem, not to create the problem, right? Unfortunately, what most of the teams are trying to do is kind of running those SaaS SDA tools, and they are kind of just going through a kind of a reactive security way, right? So what needs to be done is kind of just a threat modeling, right? You need to kind of just assess the threats and associated kind of just the risks appropriate, right? Because unfortunately, those SaaS SDA tools will not be able to kind of just catch your design issues that you are creating, right? Teams are very surprised. Hey, we keep kind of just doing the scans and it grows and grows. Of course, because you are not addressing the kind of the root cause of the problem, your design, right, and architecture. So threat modeling is a must that it needs to be there, right? Because it is kind of just such a valuable thing. It is going to produce the different kind of just artifacts. For example, it will create your security requirements so that you can select your security controls appropriately, right? And also, it's going to kind of just give your designers and architectures a kind of just pave the road in such a way that they can build or design this kind of just software in a secure manner, so that the kind of just the vulnerabilities that you are finding by running your AST tools, application security tools, is not going to be there, right? And also training is important, right? As I mentioned before, we are not kind of just providing the role-based trainings, right? For developers, for example, the secure coding development kind of just the training needs to be there. For QA, if they are involved, of course, in the security testing, we need to kind of just show them, teach them how they can kind of just do the testing in the security area, right? The same thing applies for our business architects, PMs, etc. But instead of doing this, it's kind of just things and in close collaboration with the different teams, we are working in silos, like most of the organizations, right? For example, security team writes to the security requirements, but they don't even talk to the business, right? They don't involve them. So what we need is a kind of just a common platform that's going to bring all these different stakeholders to build the security software, right? And the tools come after that. Tools will be there, right? But first, the governance, the security governance, and the kind of just the process procedures and the kind of just the security culture, as Hassan mentioned, right, needs to be there, technology is going to kind of come after that, right?
Yeah. So it's all about managing the security requirements and running it through the full life cycle, essentially, right? And just coming back, and if we're going to test it, did it come back? Did it comply with something, for example, right? Or are there things that we need to remediate, as an example? So it's interesting. We've gone from dev to DevOps to now having even more people come into the software delivery process itself and ensuring that we are adhering to those requirements. And therein lies now the construction of the software needs to be done in that way. And the only way to do it to scale appropriately is really if you've got some kind of a common platform that brings these stakeholders together, that enables them to go in there and communicate effectively. Hassan, your thoughts on producing well-secured software?
Do we have 2-3 hours? Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. I completely agree with all of you.
Yeah.
And I looked at this specific framework, and it's kind of aligning with others. First of all, typical problem we face that I have been seeing so far, we are having a great environments in terms of the software delivery. We may have a good policy. If it is not implemented in our daily life, there's no benefits. This is specifically we have to implement what the organizational policies are, should be in our daily life as a developer, should be in our daily life as an architect, should daily life as in our the threat manager, risk management team members, or the security team. That goes back to the designing secure system and review the secure system and proper test, all are related. So we should really think about that these activities we do for years and years, they are not siloed activities. As we said earlier, siloed team is a problem. With respect to the software lifecycle, siloed activities also a problem. Like if the static analysis is working well, what is the impact of static analysis with respect to the risk that we are working on? Mm-hmm. What is the relationship with the risk and threat modeling with the code analysis and dynamic analysis? We can ask the question, what is enough for us? It's really challenging because we always look, yes, I have the static analysis done, I'm okay. Or I did some dynamic analysis. Yeah, it's great, but how much we do effectively is important. Because end of the day, it is about more proactive, as I said, we should be more proactive. What the proactive means, we should prep with our right assumptions we may see in our application that we are building, then using threat modeling give right assumptions for us. Then tying into the organization risk or the application that we are building, the risks that we assign proper risks and then proper mitigation strategies, then we can verify the static analysis and other tools perspective as well. So we need to think about integration of these activities. So how it can be done, we are using DevSecOps or DevOps tools, we use that. So tools should be integrated as our process should be integrated. Like our developers, if my developer is really getting a static analytic result in 60 days later, there's no benefits. If my developer is really getting some preparation with respect to the container-based images by himself, by herself, it's not really a good practice either. So we build up an environment, but we're not able to practice as we go. That means we have to use as an organization what the policies are. Let's implement it. Let's learn. Again, there's another problem that I have been seeing a lot. We are expecting a developer knows everything. That is not correct. Developer knows what they do with respect to the engineering practices, but they are not expert in security. They should not be expert in security either, but they have to be knowledgeable enough to address the common vulnerabilities with the software engineering practices. They know what the practices means. They know the memory management means. They know what the file management it is. They know what algorithms. But we have to give an example what the CWE means for the developer, how the effects are, what the impacts are. But time is important again. I'm saying one more time, time is important. We have to get the result as early as possible. That's the foundational component for the DevSecOps as a continuous feedback. Feedback is not just a person, the system should give the feedback timely. If you're not addressing the feedback timely, it is too late. Too late to address any static analysis for all other problems. So just going to start with a lot of the talk. I would like to give a quick snapshot of what I'm thinking about it.
Wonderful. Sounds good. So you should have all seen the results from the second poll. And what I'd like to do now is jump right into protecting the software, which is that fourth part. Really looking at identifying, confirming vulnerabilities, assessing, remediating, that whole part of secure software in that life cycle. And I'd like to start with you, Ayhan, just to get your thoughts on protecting the software. Do you have any thoughts, any experience, any insights that you can bring to the table on this?
Right. Also, of course, the kind of just the security scanning tools are extremely important, but how you kind of just utilize these tools are extremely important too, right? There are different ways of kind of just running, or different kind of just stakeholders running these tools that makes the whole difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the DevSecOps area, right? The goal is empower the development teams or SDLC practitioners with the tools so that they can kind of contribute to the whole security, right? Instead of, for example, a security team is kind of just running these AST tools at the very end of the SDLC, and guess what? They find issues, and it goes to the kind of the development team, and it's a constant kind of just the friction between those teams over there, right? Mm-hmm. One way to kind of just eliminate this is empower the development teams with these kind of just the tools, right? Give them the accountability, give them the responsibility as well. Of course, you're going to kind of just put your security policies over there as part of that tool, whichever tool that you are using, right? As a security team, you can kind of publish these things over there, or you can put your kind of just the requirements, different requirements. Like, for example, if you are PCI DSS in scope, for example, you can add those into the policy. But let the kind of just the workforce, SDLC practitioners, run these tools, right? This is extremely important. And also, unfortunately, we are using just one policy, whether it's a kind of just external web application or an internal application. We apply just one policy. These are different things. The kind of the threats and the vulnerability landscape is different for these applications. So you need to kind of just define policies appropriately for these applications over there. But again, instead of kind of just cursing the darkness, when you get to the thousands and thousands of vulnerabilities, try to understand why those vulnerabilities are happening over and over again. And as I mentioned, the threat modeling comes to help over there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're working on a project right now at the Open Group, which is aimed at trying to come up with ways to create this connection between all these security artifacts that we produce. Right, we have code scan results, we have pen test results, we have threat modeling. Like, how do we tie all of this together? Is there an underlying data model that we might be able to use? So it's an exciting project. It's a gap that we've also seen out there, and hopefully, as we continue to engage in discussions, that more and more people will begin to go down the path of saying, yeah, let's come up with this unified way of doing security that helps us as we consider not just the initial creation, but also the ongoing protection of that software as well. Kyle, real quick, let me just jump to you. Do you have any thoughts on protecting the software?
Yeah, just one additional thing is that vulnerability disclosure program. I think that is something that companies probably want to consider, because then if there are their customers or whoever that want to contribute and say, hey, we actually found these vulnerabilities, they want to report, there should be a channel for them to securely report it and not being prosecuted, right? So kind of have that put in place. So I know government is kind of pushing that. 853 have one of the control there. So yeah, that is something that probably can be added to collect that vulnerability information.
That's interesting. Yeah. And Hassan, we've got about a minute to go. Any final thoughts?
You gave me a minute. What I would like to say, Altez,
we always run out.
We have to really make sure that we are doing a security differently. This is my favorite topic, which is operational piece.
Yeah.
We always focus on dev side, we always focus on the sec side, but we forget the operational pieces. What really matters to me, like, by knowing what the problem that we are facing in our production environment, in operation environment, what type of vulnerability we see, we can go back and in our life cycle as a continuously evolve, we be more proactive. So we have to do the different ways, because we learned that as an industry, we always becoming more about the reactive mode. We never able to do more proactively. Let's change that equations, make it more proactive on working the software we build. So this specifically vulnerabilities that we are monitoring, or the things that comes to our organization, really should build up a knowledge for us. That knowledge should be utilized from threat modeler, should be utilized from our developers, should be utilized from our test scenarios, security scenarios. That's actually called a security differently. So we have to make sure that we are doing different ways, because otherwise we never ever able to catch up the adversaries with the current way. Let's think about overall life cycle. Or sharing the information amongst each other. Another problem I saw so many times, this is my last word, we are sharing the information in a closed settings with our dev team member or our organization structures, but adversaries know better than us. They are sharing information much faster than what we share within our organization. Let's be sharing our problem with our friends, with our team members. Make sure that we know what we are doing, be more proactively.
Yeah, and we've started to see certainly some discussions in that space. How do we share this in a way that's open? And I think it touches on, I think, what all three of you have mentioned. And I just want to say, Kyle and Ayhan and Hassan, thank you very much. It's been an honor to facilitate this discussion today. It's been wonderful. Thank you to the audience for coming as well. We've got a couple of minutes left in today's webinar still, and I do want to afford George the opportunity to come in and bring us to a close. George, all yours.
Great. Thank you, guys. That really was an excellent presentation. As you said, thank you to our viewers for their participation. We certainly appreciate your time. I think there may be some resources available to you under the Resources tab. And to learn more about Security Compass, you can, of course, visit their website at securitycompass.com. And I'd like to point out that you can continue to link to the archived version of this webinar and see previous Signal webinars on AFCEA's Signal Magazine website. That concludes our Signal Media webinar for today. Again, we thank all of you for being with us. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.